Date June 4th, 1942, time 7:55 a.m. What if one aircraft flying alone over endless ocean changed the fate of an entire war? High above the Pacific, a single plane cut through clouds in silence, its fuel running low, its radio crackling with static. Below it, somewhere in the vast blue emptiness, 4 enemy aircraft carriers moved like shadows. Thousands of lives depended on whether this one pilot would see them or miss them. This was not a planned heroic moment. It was an accident of timing, exhaustion, and chance. The pilot had been ordered to search a sector of ocean where intelligence believed nothing would be found. His eyes burned from staring into sunlight. His engine coughed. His compass needle trembled. For hours, he saw only water. Then, suddenly, he saw ships. Not small ships, carriers, warships loaded with aircraft and fuel. In that instant, history shifted direction. If he turned back without reporting, the enemy would strike first. If he was shot down, the discovery would die with him. If his message was delayed, bombers would arrive too late. One plane carried the future of a battle. The air above Midway was already full of burning wreckage. Fighters had fallen. Torpedo planes had been wiped out. Pilots had drowned in open sea. Radio channels were crowded with cries for help and broken commands. Many believed the battle was already lost. And yet, this single aircraft flew on. It did not carry bombs for attack. It carried only eyes and information. Its purpose was not to destroy, but to reveal. The pilot leaned forward, counted ships, memorized formation, and pressed his radio switch with shaking fingers. "Enemy carrier sighted," he said. Those words were simple, but their meaning was enormous. Within minutes, dive bombers turned toward the coordinates. Engines roared, wings tilted. Men who thought they were flying to nowhere suddenly had a target. The carriers below were preparing their own planes for attack. Their decks were crowded with fuel hoses and armed bombs. Fighters were not in position. Radar was confused. No one expected an attack from above at that moment. All because one plane had looked in the right place at the right time. This story is not about a massive fleet or a famous commander. It is about a single aircraft that found what no one else could. It is about a moment when chance became destiny. It asks a dangerous question. Can one small action truly change everything? The Battle of Midway is remembered as a turning point of World War II, but hidden inside that turning point is one forgotten flight, one lonely pilot, and one message sent through static. To understand why this moment mattered so much, we must go back to the days before the battle, when the ocean itself was becoming a battlefield, and when a war depended on who would see first and who would strike first. By early 1942, the Pacific Ocean had become a moving battlefield of ships and aircraft. After months of fighting, control of islands and sea routes decided who could move supplies and who would be trapped. Aircraft carriers replaced battleships as the most powerful weapons, because planes could strike from hundreds of miles away. Midway Atoll was small and isolated, but its location made it valuable. It stood between opposing forces like a door that could not be ignored. Whoever controlled Midway could watch and block movement across the Pacific. Both sides prepared for a clash without fully knowing where the other fleet would appear. Intelligence was incomplete. Maps were guesses, radio messages were uncertain. The ocean was too large to search completely. The plan depended on aircraft. Planes would scout wide areas looking for ships. Once discovered, bombers would attack. Timing mattered more than numbers. Finding the enemy first meant surviving. On the morning of June 4th, aircraft launched in waves. Some flew too far north, some too far south. Fuel disappeared quickly. Navigation errors multiplied. Clouds hid the sea. Torpedo planes attacked blindly and were destroyed one by one. Fighters fell. The sky filled with smoke trails and burning wreckage. Many pilots never saw the enemy carriers at all. Confusion ruled the air. At this moment, one scout aircraft continued its search beyond the expected limit. Its mission was simple, but dangerous: to look where no one else had looked. The pilot flew lower, scanning the surface. His fuel gauge dropped. Turning back meant safety. Flying forward meant risk. He chose forward. What he saw changed everything. A line of warships cut across the water. 4 aircraft carriers moved in formation. Their decks were crowded with planes being armed and refueled. They were preparing to launch another attack. The scouts report reached command just in time. Dive bombers that had been circling without targets suddenly received coordinates. They turned together, forming a path in the sky. They climbed into the sun so that they would not be seen. Below, the carriers were vulnerable. Fighters were low on fuel. Radar was confused by earlier attacks. No one expected bombers to arrive from that direction. This was not planned brilliance. It was the result of one aircraft seeing something others did not. When the dive bombers struck, explosions tore through decks filled with fuel and ammunition. Fire spread instantly. In minutes, ships that had dominated the sea were burning wrecks. The balance of power changed in one morning. Before this moment, the enemy fleet believed it controlled the sky. After this moment, its carriers were sinking. The importance of this event was not only military. It proved that modern war depended on information more than size. A single observation could defeat massive forces. A lone aircraft could reshape strategy. This battle did not end the war. It did not stop suffering. But it shifted momentum and showed how fragile power could be when surprise replaced planning. And at the center of that shift was one flight, one message, and one decision to keep searching when turning back would have been easier. This is why that forgotten plane matters. Because wars are not only changed by weapons, they are changed by seeing. The radio message cut through static like a knife. Enemy carriers sighted. Those words reached pilots who had been circling empty skies for nearly an hour. Their fuel was running low, their nerves were already breaking. Many believed the enemy had escaped them. Now they had coordinates. Engines roared louder. Wings turned together. Dive bombers shifted course in a tight formation, climbing toward the sun so they would not be seen from below. Sweat filled cockpits. Hands tightened on control sticks. The sky became quiet again, except for engines and breathing. Below them, the carriers moved calmly across the ocean. On their decks, planes were being refueled and rearmed. Bombs lay exposed. Fuel hoses crossed wooden planks. Fighters that should have been guarding the sky were low on fuel after chasing earlier attackers. Radar operators were confused by overlapping reports. No one expected another strike from above. The single scout plane had found them at the worst possible moment. As the dive bombers reached altitude, clouds opened like a curtain. The ships appeared below, lined up across the water like dark shapes in a painting. The pilots saw smoke rising from earlier skirmishes, but the decks were still crowded with aircraft and equipment. There was no time for speeches. Only signals. One pilot rocked his wings. Then they went down. The first aircraft tipped forward and plunged toward the sea. Sirens screamed as speed increased. Wind shook the wings violently. The ocean rushed upward. Anti-aircraft fire exploded around them, black clouds of metal and smoke tearing holes through the sky. Pilots held their course. They had been trained for this moment, but training did not remove fear. It only taught them how to move through it. Bombs were released. They fell straight down into ships filled with fuel and explosives. The first carrier was hit near the center of its deck. Fire erupted instantly. A second bomb tore through aircraft lined up for launch. Flames rolled across wood and metal. Men ran in all directions. Water hoses failed. Smoke swallowed the sky. Another carrier was struck seconds later. Its deck shattered. Planes burned where they stood. The heat became unbearable. Explosions followed explosions, as if the ship itself were tearing apart from inside. Within minutes, 3 carriers were burning. The sea around them filled with oil and wreckage. This had not been planned in detail. It had happened because one aircraft had seen what others had not. Above the flames, the dive bombers pulled out of their dives and escaped toward clouds. Some were hit, some never returned. The sky behind them was filled with smoke columns rising like black towers from the ocean. On the water, damage control teams fought fires that could not be controlled. Fuel-fed flames spread below decks. Ammunition exploded. Commanders ordered abandoned ship. Sailors jumped into the sea. The battle that had seemed lost hours earlier had turned without warning. But the fight was not over. Another carrier still remained operational. Aircraft launched from it in a desperate counterattack. Bombers raced toward the opposing fleet. Fighters met them in the air. Planes collided. Smoke trails crossed like broken lines. Some ships were damaged. Some men died. Yet the balance had shifted. What had begun as a search mission became a collapse of strength. The single scout plane that found the carriers did not fire a shot. It did not drop a bomb. It simply looked and spoke and disappeared back into the sky. By afternoon, the ocean was filled with burning ships and floating debris. The sound of engines faded into distant echoes. Survivors drifted on life rafts. The water reflected smoke and fire like a broken mirror. This was not a victory parade. It was destruction meeting. Destruction. And inside that destruction, one moment stood apart. The moment when a lone aircraft revealed what had been hidden. The battle did not end the war, but it ended the illusion that control could not be broken. A single observation had opened the door. Now history stepped through it. The climax of the battle did not come with a single explosion. It came with silence. After hours of fire and falling aircraft, the sky slowly emptied. Engines faded. Smoke remained. Waves carried wreckage in long lines across the ocean. What remained was realization. One side had lost its carriers. One side had lost many pilots. Both had lost lives. But the direction of the war had changed. The lesson of this battle was not about numbers or strength. It was about timing and vision. The carriers that burned were not defeated by a massive fleet arriving together. They were defeated because they were seen at the wrong moment. The single aircraft's discovery forced an action that could not be undone. For the pilots who followed that radio call, the attack felt unreal. They later said they believed they were diving into death. They saw ships burning before their bombs even struck. They felt the shock waves through their wings. They did not know if they would return. Some did not. Their loss became part of the cost of that moment. On the sea below, sailors faced fire that could not be extinguished. Ships designed to dominate oceans became floating furnaces. The water itself burned. Orders were given that could not save everything. Abandon ship. Those words meant survival for some and final separation for others. The resolution of the battle was not clean. It was slow and heavy. Ships sank over hours. Smoke drifted for miles. The ocean swallowed metal and memory together. When night came, only dark water and broken equipment remained where powerful carriers had once ruled. The war continued in many places after this day. Cities still burned, armies still marched, camps still filled with prisoners. Nothing became suddenly peaceful. But something changed in the minds of those who planned war. They learned that information could defeat power. They learned that one mistake in timing could destroy years of preparation. They learned that control over the sky depended on seeing first, not striking hardest. The single aircraft that found the carriers did not win alone. Many others had fought and fallen before that moment. Torpedo crews had attacked and been destroyed. Fighters had burned in the air. Radar operators had struggled with confusion. All of them created the conditions that made this final strike possible. This was not a story of one hero replacing many. It was a story of one moment unlocking many sacrifices. The climax of this battle was not only the burning of ships, it was the collapse of certainty. Certainty that a fleet could not be surprised. Certainty that planning could control chance. Certainty that power could not be broken by sight alone. The resolution teaches something difficult. War is not decided only by strength. It is decided by human choices inside chaos. One pilot chose to search longer. One radio call chose a direction. One group of aircraft chose to dive. And because of those choices, the future changed. The ocean that day did not remember names. It carried smoke, fire, and silence. But history remembers the moment when a single aircraft revealed the truth hidden under clouds. Not with pride. Not with celebration. But with caution. Because it shows how fragile control truly is. The battle ended with fewer ships on the water and more questions in the air. Questions about how many lives depended on one decision. Questions about how easily power can vanish. The resolution is not victory. The resolution is awareness. Awareness that wars turn on moments no one can fully plan. Awareness that even the smallest actions can open doors to massive consequences. Awareness that seeing is sometimes stronger than shooting. And that is how the forgotten battle reached its turning point. Not by a fleet, but by a single aircraft that refused to turn back. Freedom after the battle did not arrive as celebration, but as quiet understanding that a single sighting had changed many lives, and that survival came from awareness rather than force, reminding witnesses that history often turns on small decisions made under pressure in skies filled with smoke and fragile moments. Those who flew that day carried memories heavier than metals, knowing the ocean kept the names of friends who never returned, and that victory meant nothing without the cost that followed, teaching later generations to question simple stories and search for the human truth inside maps and reports every time. The lesson of the forgotten flight is not about machines or flags, but about seeing when others cannot, choosing to continue when doubt says stop, and understanding that information can save lives or end them depending on how quickly it is shared and believed in the hardest hours of war. Many battles are remembered by numbers and dates, yet this one is remembered by a moment, a message sent through static, and a path drawn across the sky, proving that history can pivot on vision rather than volume, and that courage sometimes looks like patience inside great storms of conflict. The ocean kept the silence of burned ships, while the sky kept the echo of engines that never returned, and between them remained a warning for the future, that wars are shaped by fragile seconds, and that no plan survives without humility, and people forget the cost of vision always. This story does not praise power or command. It honors awareness and responsibility, reminding us that even one observation can redirect suffering, and that remembering such moments is a way to respect those who faced fear with open eyes and steady hands during the longest days of the World War. In the end, the forgotten battle teaches that history listens to the smallest signals, and that meaning can rise from a single flight across empty water, leaving behind a lesson about choice, memory, and the quiet power of seeing clearly for every generation that seeks truth in difficult times ahead. I've just said what's recorded in history. You should find out the real truth yourself. We have written the sources from which we got this story in the description of this video. And we have always been and will be supporters of the oppressed, regardless of their color, race, or country. This world and its creator are also with the oppressed. If this World War II story moved you, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more forgotten air and sea stories. Every battle hides lessons about choice, chance, and human cost. Stay with us for history that remembers voices often lost. See you in the next WWII story.